Speaking to his nation from the Oval Office on Wednesday evening, U.S. President Joe Biden called his exit from the 2024 presidential race a matter of saving democracy and passing the torch to a new generation. VOA correspondent Chris Casquejo joins us live from Washington, D.C. with the details. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Chris, why did Biden feel the need to make this speech and actually address the nation?
Well, Biden wanted the chance to tell the country why he decided to abruptly drop out of the race for president, but he offered few specifics other than to say the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. He did not name his Republican opponent in the presidential race that he just withdrew from by name, but analysts say that Biden's stark warnings throughout his speech all point to one person. Jennifer Mercica, professor of journalism and communication at Texas A&M University, said that Biden talked about polarization, he talked about violence, political violence, and these things all harken back to Donald Trump and his presidency. He talked about the threats facing the nation when he took office in January 2021. And so that was certainly about Donald Trump, but it really wasn't a place for him to give a political speech or a campaign speech. Biden said his job now will be to focus on domestic issues like civil rights and voter freedom, gun safety reforms, the quest to end cancer, and Supreme Court reform. He also cited the various challenges that the U.S. faces overseas with wars raging in Gaza and Ukraine, and China becoming more aggressive and emboldened in the Indo-Pacific. Dami?
Well, but even after stepping aside from the race, it looks like there are calls for Biden to actually step down from his post. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, we're hearing that from Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance and also from House Speaker Mike Johnson. They've suggested that if Biden is not fit to run for re-election, he's also not suited to lead the country, which White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said, "I think that's ridiculous," seriously, during an appearance on ABC talk show The View on Tuesday.
Well, polls show that many voters didn't want a rematch of Biden and Trump. Now that Vice President Kamala Harris is the likely Democratic candidate, how are the campaigns changing their strategy?
Well, it's certainly true that the Republicans can no longer focus on age because Harris is 59 years old, much younger than President Trump, former President Trump, who is 77. Now, the analysts say that they'll likely focus on her California background because that state is seen as much more liberal than the rest of the country. And Republican VP candidate J.D. Vance has already tied her to Biden's record as president on the campaign trail. So they're going to try to tie her to issues like Israel and Gaza, her role as fighting the root causes of the border crisis at the southern border. They're actually calling her the border czar in some of their attacks against her. But Harris, for her part, says that voters will have a clear choice between her vision and Trump's vision.
Well, you have to tell us who's doing better in recent polls, Trump or Harris or Trump? Well, because earlier polls showed that Harris had a slight lead over Trump.
Yeah, and that really depends on which polls you're looking at. The poll you're talking about where Harris had a slight lead is the latest Ipsos Reuters national poll. Harris leads 44 to 42, but that's within the 3-point margin of error. So they're actually in a statistical dead heat in that national poll. But in some of the battleground states that are going to decide the election, initial polling shows that since Biden's withdrawal, Harris is narrowing Donald Trump's lead in those battleground states. The latest Emerson College in the Hill poll shows that Trump is still leading in Arizona by 5 points, and he's ahead of her by 2 points in Georgia and Pennsylvania, and 1 point in Michigan and in Wisconsin. They're tied. Now, the Brookings Institution says that Harris is really resetting this race because they believe that she'll be competitive in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, which are those battleground states that could decide the election, and also in other swing states like Arizona, which were starting to slip away because of concerns over Biden's age, but she could put those back into contention for Democrats.
And of course,
and also I want to note that.
Yes, please go ahead.
I also want to note that she does better with young voters in some of the latest polls. Only 53% would vote for Biden over Trump, but Kamala Harris, younger voters would vote for her 60% rate, and that's a 20-point lead over Trump. So these younger voters, if they turn out, could be very important in November.
They could be an important variable. Now, we all know the next big decision for Harris is her vice presidential candidate pick. Chris, who are some of the leading contenders so far?
Well, there's a few governors on the list and one senator, but one thing they have in common is they're all from some of those battleground states. The campaign has requested vetting materials from 5 Democratic governors: Roy Cooper of North Carolina, Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, Tim Walz of Minnesota, J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, and 1 U.S. Senator, Mark Kelly from Arizona. Now, former U.S. Attorney General under President Obama, Eric Holder, and his law firm are in charge of vetting the potential VP candidates. Now, it is most likely that Harris, who is the daughter of a black father and an Indian mother, will choose a white man to be her number 2, according to Joel Goldstein, who studies vice presidents at the St. Louis University School of Law. Geographical balance is also another factor. Harris, who is from California, likely desires someone who can boost the party's chances in those critical swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina. So that's why these are some of the names on the list. And she's probably also seeking ideological balance. A lot of the names and a lot of the faces you're seeing on screen are perceived as more moderate, whereas Harris is going to have to try to outrun the label that Republicans are putting on her that she's a liberal from California.
Definitely. All right, Chris, thanks so much for the report today. As always, we appreciate it.
Good to be with you always.